When the administration is trying to dig us out of a deep hole, it's difficult for them to take your personal finances into account. You have to do that. I choose to diversify my savings with gold from Birch Gold Group, and you can too. Just text the word Dinesh to 989898. Birch Gold will send you a free, no obligation information kit on gold. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers. You too can diversify with Birch Gold. Text Dinesh to 989898. Coming up, Trump is meeting with Zelensky pretty much as we speak. I'll explore what a deal between Russia and Ukraine brokered by Trump and the U.S. might look like. The runaway Texas Democrats are back. I'll talk about the significance of that. Bevelyn Beatty Williams joins me. We're going to talk about her prison ordeal and also a new film that tells her life story. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, X, or Rumble, listening on Apple or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. Hit the subscribe, the follow, the notifications button. That would be great. I'd appreciate it. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
I'm going to talk in this opening segment about two things. The first is Trump's new post from this morning about balloting and election integrity. And I'm also going to talk about Trump and his meeting with Putin and what we can expect out of this Ukraine negotiation. I'm going to lead a movement, Trump writes, to get rid of mail-in ballots. And also, while we're at it, highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial voting machines. So this is a big development because this is an issue very important to many of us, obviously me included, and you most likely as well. And it appeared that this issue was getting somewhat ignored or sidelined. It's almost like Trump won. This is the last time he's really running for national office. And will this issue fall by the wayside with very bad kind of long-term consequences? But no, Trump is all over it. And I think he's all over it, yes, to fix the future, but he's also all over it because he wants to be vindicated on 2020. I think if there's one thing that Trump is more certain of than just about anything else, it's that he won the 2020 election. In fact, he goes on to say this. He says it leaves no doubt at the end of the evening as to who won, in all caps, and who lost, in all caps, the election. So what he's saying is that if we don't have these voting machines, which tend to produce these interminable delays, you will know on election day, as by the way, you know in other countries, and in fact, very big countries, Brazil, India, countries with giant size, giant population, and yet somehow by 9 p.m. at night, they've declared a winner. The balloting has all been counted and tabulated, and yet somehow with us, it is not the case. We are now the only country in the world that uses mail-in voting. All others gave it up because of the massive voter fraud encountered, all caps. So Trump believes, and I think he's right, that voter fraud is enabled by mail-in ballots. And the reason for this could not be more obvious. It is that when you go to vote in person, there are people there. There is a controlled environment. You go behind a curtain. You can't really take things with you, per se. And when you leave, you have to leave your ballot behind. There's not much of a chance to tamper with the ballot, to change it, for somebody else to vote on your behalf. All of these things are prevented by the scrutiny that voting in person ensures. Mail-in ballots, a whole different matter. Millions of ballots get sent out. Nobody knows where and when they land. No one knows who opens the ballot. No one knows who fills out the ballot. The signature is a kind of joke since those signatures aren't really properly checked anyway. And not only that, but once your mail-in ballot and your envelope are detached from each other, they can never be put back together again. So even a later audit of what happened with a particular batch of mail-in ballots becomes difficult, if not impossible. Trump then goes on to why this hasn't happened already. He says that this effort to fix the election process will be opposed by the Democrats because they cheat at levels never seen before. So what he's saying really is that, people might sometimes ask, and they would ask me, well, Dinesh, why can't well-meaning people get together and fix this process? And the answer is because we aren't dealing with well-meaning people. These are not people. In the case of the Democrats, you have a gangsterized party. You have a party that wants to maximize opportunities for cheating. This is part of the reason I believe that Jane Fonda said that COVID was, quote, God's gift to the left. It enables you to change the rules. It enables you to create opportunities for massive fraud. And there was probably more fraud, in my view, in 2020 than in any other election in U.S. history. And because of the opportunities created by COVID, that may be true not just for the past, but maybe also for the future. Now, the biggest obstacle that Trump is going to face here is very clear, and that is that states are going to oppose him, Democratic states in particular. They're going to say, hey, listen, the job of conducting these elections is up to the states. Now, Trump understands this, but he makes this argument. He goes, remember, the states are merely an agent for the federal government in counting and tabulating the votes. They must do what the federal government, as represented by the President of the United States, tells them for the good of our country to do. And this part, I think, is by no means obvious. It's by no means that the Democrats are, in fact, going to agree to this. And courts are undoubtedly going to have their say in the matter. Now, let me turn to the situation with Trump and Putin. In fact, today, the meeting scheduled for the White House with Zelensky. Evidently, Zelensky is not coming by himself. He's bringing a troop of European leaders and others. Maybe some of the Democrats are also going to demand to be part of the meeting. So it's like Zelensky needs a team, not just a team from Ukraine. There obviously will be other people from Ukraine joining Zelensky, but he wants to have some of his other allies present as well, probably because he thinks he's somehow going to be steamrolled by Trump. Now, Trump had the meeting with Putin in Alaska, after which the Democrats uniformly declared the meeting was a failure. He didn't produce a peace agreement. Now, anyone who says this has got to be rudely dismissed and even ejected from polite company, because anyone who thinks that you can have a war that's been raging now for, years, with its roots going even further back, and think that, hey, we're going to have a meeting in Alaska, and the meeting, by the way, is not even between Putin and Zelensky. It's not between the two engaged parties. It's between Putin and Trump. So right away, Trump said at the outset, he goes, listen, I'm not negotiating for Zelensky. It's not as if Trump can say, hey, listen, Putin, you take this part of Ukraine and I want this part of Russia. Let's do a land swap. Trump is not going to get into any of that. So Trump's original objective was kind of focused. It was, let's get a ceasefire. Let us stop the killing. I think Trump himself realized, even before the summit, before the meeting with Putin, that a ceasefire does nothing but freeze the existing grievance into place. Kind of like two guys in the street, they're having blows, and you're like, let's have a ceasefire. Well, okay, they'll agree to a ceasefire, but then tomorrow morning they're back up to fighting again because the grievance hasn't been settled. It hasn't, the underlying cause of their conflict hasn't really been removed. They haven't come to some mutual understanding that, yes, I can live with this, or yes, this is your due and I can settle for that. That hasn't happened. So Trump moved from the idea that what we want is a ceasefire to the, I think, kind of deeper issue. What we want is some resolution of the key issue between Trump and Zelensky. Now, I'll take a short pause, and when I come back, I want to highlight what that key issue is. And happily, it is an issue that is largely in the hands of Trump himself. And so it turns out that even though this will end up being a negotiation between Putin and Zelensky, the Trump card, in some ways, is held by Trump himself. When the cultural tide turns against truth, it becomes more important than ever to support the storytellers who are willing to stand for truth. That's what Angel is doing. They're not just producing entertainment, they're giving a home to stories that reflect the principles this country was founded on: faith, family, and freedom. They've released films like Sound of Freedom, which expose the modern-day reality of child trafficking when Hollywood refused to touch it. They're backing projects like The Last Rodeo and Green and Gold, stories that celebrate middle America, sacrifice, and generational legacy. Angel isn't answering to Hollywood gatekeepers, they answer to their members. That's where the Angel Guild comes in. Guild members vote on which projects move forward. They help to support the stories that deserve to be told, and they're proving that when ordinary people unite behind truth, extraordinary things happen. Join the movement. Go to angel.com/Dinesh. Join the Angel Guild today. Support films that reflect your values. Go to angel.com/Dinesh. I'm really happy to talk to you about the amazing people at PhD Weight Loss. These are people who have figured it out. Debbie lost 24 pounds. I lost 27. This was 2 years ago. And guess what? We've kept it off. It's our way of life eating now, and we love it. The program is simple. They do the planning for you. All you have to do is follow the plan, just like we did. It's customized to your personal needs and your schedule. It's not a one-size-fits-all plan. They even provide 80% of your food at no additional cost. There are no drugs, no injections, no expensive medication. This is 100% science-based nutrition. This plan teaches your body to heal itself. You meet with your nutritionist every week. If you have questions, you call or email. You're never alone. You always have support. The plan focuses on removing the inflammation from your body, so inflammatory diseases like high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes are always reduced and often eliminated. The first 10 callers who mention my name, Dinesh, get 2 free weeks added to their program. Plus, when you fully commit, you get 15% off your entire program. So give them a call right now, 864-644-1900. Don't forget to mention the word Dinesh. You get a bunch of savings. Again, the number, 864-644-1900. Why did this Ukraine war start in the first place? Now, the conventional answer is, well, Putin invaded Ukraine. Well, why did he do that? Let's think back. Ukraine was part of the old Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, in a sense, allowed independence for Ukraine. They never had to give it up in the first place. They were not forced to relinquish Ukraine, but they did. But they did under a couple of conditions. The first one was that Ukraine would not join NATO. They didn't want to have a belligerent, hostile force right on their doorstep. And by the way, Russia is hardly unique. We don't want that. China doesn't want that. No large power wants to have their enemies breathing down their neck right across from their shores. So that was one important condition. And the other was there was a grievance between Russia and Ukraine, which was that there are Russian-speaking parts of Ukraine. There are people who are ethnically Russian, who essentially are Russian in culture, Russian in language, Russian even in their own sense of attachment, but they are in fact in Ukraine. And the more hostile the two countries are, the more the ethnic Russians in Ukraine feel beleaguered, feel unsafe. And Putin's point is we want to protect our fellow Russians in Ukraine. This is, I think, part of the Russian claim to Ukraine, or at least to the Russian-speaking parts of Ukraine. And yet Ukraine doesn't want to give up any territory or give up any land. The problem for Ukraine is that they are not going to be able to win a war against Russia, which is a much larger, more powerful country. Even with NATO's help, by and large, Ukraine is the best it can do is hold off the Russians, impose, if you will, a punishment or penalty on the Russians, perhaps to try to deter them, perhaps to convince them to turn around and go home. Now, the one condition that I think Trump has agreed with Putin on, and I think rightly so, is he said, all right, look, Ukraine, you're not going to be able to join NATO. NATO is not going to let you in, and the United States has a veto power, has a say-so over that. The United States is, in fact, the main force, the leader of the NATO alliance, and so Trump has the power to quite clearly enunciate no NATO membership for Ukraine. And that alone, I think, takes us about halfway there to some kind of a rapprochement or deal or way of resolving the issue. The unresolved issue, and here I think Trump is going to have to back off, is the issue of land. Because whenever there's a fight, there's going to be someone who takes somebody else's land, and the other guy always wants it back, but he did lose it in a fair fight. And so this becomes, of course, a major issue. We see it, for example, with Israel in the 48 war. Israel won, and they got a hold of Israel. Now, they didn't have all of Israel, but in 1967, they got the Sinai, they got the Golan Heights, they got the West Bank, they got the Gaza Strip. They made a peace deal with Egypt, and they gave back the Sinai, but they've kept the rest of it. Now, they allowed autonomy for the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, but that was still under Israeli sovereignty and under Israeli rule. And so the question is Putin going to cede land to Ukraine, give it back, so to speak? Is Ukraine going to make any agreements? This is ultimately going to be, I think, a case where both sides are going to weigh the continuing cost of a war. Now, if there's one good thing, it's that the cost of war has been pretty heavy on the Russian side as well. So hopefully, I think this is what Trump is hoping, Putin himself. Normally, when you have an elephant, doing battle against a lamb or against, a squirrel, the elephant is going to be in no mood to stop. A cat is going to be in no mood to stop in playfully dangling a mouse because the cat is completely in charge. The way to get the cat to make some kind of agreement with the mouse is to impose some penalties and suffering on the cat. And that has been the case in this war. Russia has suffered major blows, partly because of the highly sophisticated weaponry from Ukraine. So what are the chances that this is going to find a resolution? I would say, to me, something like 50-50. I think both parties are somewhat exhausted. The Russians might believe there's no reason for us to give up now. We're going to win in the end. And I think that is actually probably true. But they might also decide, hey, enough is enough. We've got other things we want to worry about. There's artificial intelligence, there's robotics. We want to build our economy. We don't want to continue in a war that has proven pretty destructive even for our side. Of course, for Ukraine, their survival is at stake. They have suffered just almost unimaginably horrific losses. They have been drafting people of an increasingly young age. It's a horrible situation over there. So they have every incentive. If there's any way for them to get to the end of this war, they have every incentive to want to do that. Let me offer a couple of tidbits in the news that I think you'll find interesting. MSNBC is giving up its name, and it's giving up its name because it's going to be severing its relationship with NBC. This is actually very good because NBC has been sort of sustaining this little monster, MSNBC. So somewhat amusingly, MSNBC is changing its name to MS Now. MS Now. Kind of weird. But it supposedly stands for My Source of News, Opinion, and the World. MS Now is the abbreviation for all that. But to me, it would be actually better if they call it, because MS is kind of like Ms. So-and-so. It'd be kind of funny if they called it Ms. Misinformation. Or even misleading. Get it? That's my marketing advice for MSNBC. I also want to note, and I might talk more about this tomorrow, that the Texas runaway Democrats are back, and they're back in Austin. which is to say that they have concluded that there is no way to stop the Republican redistricting. I think they're now invested in trying to make some larger point about Democratic states also engaging in redistricting. But Chris Cillizza, the reporter, has done a sort of a survey of redistricting on the blue states and also in the red states, and he posts the following: in a redistricting war, Republicans would win. Now, why is that? Well, the reason is actually kind of obvious, and that is that Republicans tend to be the guys who are slow to move. They tend to be the guys who play by the rules. Democrats try to stack the deck, rig the rules in their favor, and they've been doing this now for at least a couple of decades, if not more. So guess what? The rules in the blue states are stacked heavily in favor of the Democrats. You have a whole bunch of states that have decent proportions of Republicans, and yet not a single Republican seat, and not a single Republican congressman from these states. Which states? I'll name them: Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, New Mexico, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Vermont, Hawaii, Delaware. These places have about 37, 38, 42, 43% Republican. So you'd think that out of 10 seats, 4 would go to the Republicans. No. Republicans get 0. Why? Redistricting. So the point is, and I've complained about it, and others have as well, Republicans don't play by the same rules as Democrats. But what that creates under Trump is the opportunity for us now to play by the rules that the Democrats play by, and we get more advantage out of it. Why? Because our states aren't as gerrymandered as theirs are. And so, yeah, they can do some more gerrymandering in California. They can apparently do some more in Oregon, maybe a little more in Illinois. But that's 3. We can do it in Kansas, in Missouri, in Texas, in Louisiana, in Mississippi, in Arkansas, in Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Kentucky, and Ohio. We have a lot more seats to gerrymander than they do. And so they keep throwing out this sort of pugnacious rhetoric and so on. You know, we're finally bringing a gun to the gunfight. Well, as it turns out, go ahead and do it, because this is a game that in the long run, the Republicans are going to win. A major retail chain just canceled a big order, leaving MyPillow with an overstock of classic MyPillows. And Mike Lindell says, hey, their loss is your gain. For a limited time, MyPillow is offering their entire classic collection at true wholesale prices. Get a standard MyPillow for just $17.98. One more, upgrade to a queen size for just $22.98, or king size for $24.98. You can snag body pillows for $29.98 and versatile multi-use pillows for just $9.98. Plus, when your order's over $75, you get $100 in free digital gifts, no strings attached. That's right, premium pillows at unbeatable prices and bonus gifts to top it off. So don't wait. Head to mypillow.com, or you can call 800-876-0227. That's 800-876-0227. Don't forget to use the promo code DINESH Dinesh to grab your standard MyPillow for just $17.98 while supplies last. Guys, if you'd like to support my work, there's a very good way to do it. Check out my Locals channel and consider becoming an annual subscriber. I post a lot of exclusive content there, including content you won't find anywhere else. On Locals, you get Dinesh Unchained, Dinesh Uncensored. You can also interact with me directly. I do a live weekly Q&A every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic is off limits. I've also uploaded some cool films to Locals. This is on my movie page. I've got documentaries, feature films, 2,000 Mules, Police State, Vindicating Trump, Trump Card, our only feature film, a political thriller called Infidel starring Jim Caviezel, and big film coming out this fall. Hey, if you're an annual subscriber, you can stream and watch this movie content for free. It's included with your subscription. So check out the channel. It's dinesh.locals.com. I'd love to have you along for this great ride. Again, it's dinesh.locals.com. Guys, I'm delighted to welcome back to the podcast our friend Bevelyn Beatty Williams. She is Well, a heroine in my book, and she has been a fighter for the cause. We featured her in Police State, but guess what? Well, I think that might have given her a touch of being a film star. She's now gone on to bigger things with a new film about her life, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. The film is actually called Pardon Me, the Bevelyn B. Williams story. And the website, this is actually a website to end all websites, pardon me, the Bevelyn B. Williams story.com. Actually, very easy to remember. You can follow Bevelyn on X, Mrs. MRS Bevelyn W for Williams. Bevelyn, welcome. Thanks for coming on. It's always great to see you. You're looking good.
Thank you.
And let's start by me asking you about this film. It's a film featuring your life and your story, and I want to talk about your story, but it's not often that people get a movie made about them, and in this case, it's not you playing yourself in the movie, it's a movie that has actors and actresses, and they are acting out your life story. But tell me how did this come about?
Right. So just to let you know, you can go to watchpardonme.com. It's hyperlinked with that website. So if Bevelyn, pardon me, the Bevelyn B. Williams story is too long for you, just go to watchpardonme.com and it'll get you right to that website.
Perfect.
So Silk of Diamond and Silk, she is a, wonderful friend of mine. I see her as a mother figure. She was like, you know what? I want to get behind this girl. I want to tell her story. I've done a few interviews with her and she was just like, girl, we would always get into personal stuff of my life. And she was like, girl, your life is like a movie. And so her and her company, Harvard Productions, did this movie.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right.
And were you like on the set? Were you actively involved in kind of overseeing it and make sure that they got your story
Yeah, I
right?
mean, I have never been on a set before, so I didn't know like all the intricate details that happens there. But I was on the set, I was on makeup, I was on characters, I was on storyline. Like I was very adamant to make sure that the story was like mine. Now, this is the challenge though, and I believe I can be transparent about this. Sometimes when you hire certain directors, right, or certain producers, it seems like when you're hiring a team, Dinesh, you know this. Sometimes people come with their own vision. And it's really important to like control the narrative. I'm sure by now you've already known your team that knows how to work with you and get what you want down. But sometimes, this is new for us and it was new for Mama Silk. So we had a director who was more used to like action films and drama. And so there were times he wanted to throw in a scene that didn't really align with the story. And so I would have to be like, hey, no, listen, you don't need all of that. The story alone is good. Just, stop trying to throw in these extra things. So we really had to work hard to make sure that they kept this story 95% true. That was my biggest thing. I didn't want 10% true based on a true story. I wanted 95%. I wanted people to watch what happened in my life and see the truth. So yeah.
And sometimes the case. I know this particularly with writers. The novelist Tom Wolfe, he had written Bonfire of the Vanities, and I once asked him, "What did you think of the movie called Bonfire of the Vanities?" And he goes, "I can't watch it." He goes, "It's horrible because they took his film and they did something else with it." And he didn't have that kind of control. But what you're saying is you have seen the final product and you're like, I'm happy with it. This is in fact my story.
Right. And actually, to be honest with you, we're other than like fresh, we want to kind of refresh some of the edits. But other than that, yes, I was happy with it. It brought what I wanted the message to bring to the table, which was, in my trial when I was sentenced, right? Right after I called your wife and told you guys what happened. Um, Before that, I basically had said to them, you guys set us up. You push this my body, my choice narrative. And then we go kill our kids and we go get on this welfare and we go do these things that you ushered this yellow brick road for us to do. And now we're dealing with depression. We're dealing with emptiness. We're dealing with loneliness. And so we turn into criminals. We turn to do illegal stuff. We're bored. We have idle hands and we get into that mess. And now the same record that you told us to go and do these things. And now we build a record from the consequences of doing these things. And then you throw us in prison. So it's like it's a setup for failure for my community. And so I wanted in that movie to expose that. I wanted to expose my childhood, my challenges, and how the system was set up for me to fail because I wasn't a real criminal, because of I stood for what I stood for. And so, yeah, the movie did an excellent job displaying that.
Let's get to that message, and let's get to the way in which you came to that realization. Tell us a little bit, Bevelyn. You've been on the show before. You've sketched a little bit in the aftermath of your case, but talk about, for example, how you started out, where you grew up, and how you got kind of on the wrong road, and then something helped turn you around. So give us a glimpse of what that was.
Right. So, you said something interesting. You said kind of on the wrong road. No, I was led to the wrong road. There's a lot of children in this nation that are born not knowing the difference between right and wrong. They're chastised when they're too loud waking up to get ready for school and their parent is tired and they're beat before they go to school, rather than being punished for having bad grades or being, getting into a fight in school. You get suspended for school for 10 days. You're not disciplined for that. But if you're up in the morning and you're too loud and wake up mommy, you're punched in the face. So you got to understand that type of foundation. How does a kid like that understand the difference between right and wrong when they do the wrong thing, they're not punished. But when they're doing the right thing in the midst of being right, they're punished. So this is what I mean. My movie with my mom, I went easy on her. Okay. I was light. I did not display my older brother. People don't know this about me, Dinesh, but I'm going to be transparent. I have an older brother right now that I did not put in the movie. He is right, as of right now, he lives in the woods in a box and he is strung out on drugs. And that's the God honest truth. I don't know how to get in touch with him. He pops up when he pops up. I haven't seen him in years. I ask about him all the time and they just say, Bev, he's skinny, his eyes bulge out of his head, and this is my older brother. And I did not understand my older brother until I went to prison. When my brother was 12 years old, he came home and saw my mom crying. Okay. My mom's crying. And of course, as a 12-year-old son, you're like, Mom, what's wrong? My mom says, "Oh, we're about to, our rent is due. We're about to get kicked out." Okay. So my brother gets a sawed-off shotgun and he goes and he sticks someone up and robs them. Okay. He gives the money to my mom. My mom then bails out her boyfriend. And now my brother goes to jail and now in prison. I realize now, and I think you went there for the weekend, so I don't even think you could relate to just sitting up in that prison like this. But let me tell you this. Could you imagine being in a juvenile detention center with all boys up to the age of 18, no girls, raging hormones, young, violent, and you throw a 12-year-old boy in something like that all because he tried to help his mom? And if that could just give you a taste of how hard my childhood was, it really was God. It's a miracle that I'm a normal person talking to you today. It's a miracle.
And how did that miracle come about, Bevelyn? In other words, I think I first saw you when you were talking to some campus activists or someone on the street who was berating you about Joe Biden. And I
Yes.
think you were talking to them about why Joe Biden and the Democrats were so bad for the Black community. And I
Mhm.
think that's the first time we connected with each other. But at that time, you were already involved as a pro-life activist and as a community activist trying to reform um, the Black community. How did you even get on that path? Was it did you meet someone who introduced you to Christ? How did all that happen?
So I actually found Christ in jail. I was in jail and prison are two different things, just so you know. Jail is
Yeah,
like booking at the precinct.
yeah.
Prison is like you got a number, ID number, all of that. So I was in jail and I was waiting on my dad to bail me out because at that time I was doing like illegal scamming for money, things like that. And so while I was there, I had met this woman that was there in jail, and she she told me about a night that I was depressed in the bathroom and I was crying out to God for help because I just felt so empty. And she told me about that night, and she told me I needed to surrender my life to Christ. So I did. So for a year, once I got out, I mean, I straightened up. For a year, I was just chilling. I mean, I wasn't really Christian just yet, but I was not doing the things that I was doing before. Fast money, just messing with, drug dealers and in a mixy lifestyle. I just kind of backed off and kind of went into a wilderness. Then I met Edme. When I met Edme, she was the one who charged me to read the Bible. And I did not know that the Democrats were the Confederates. I had no idea that they had fought to keep slavery. Like even though I had went to school and I was privy to like the war, I didn't know which side was on which side. I didn't understand the Republican Party. I didn't understand any of it. I just thought I was a Democrat because I was black. And she said, "What are you, a Democrat?" I said, "Yeah." Why? Because I'm black. And she didn't scold me. But she said, let me teach you. And so we would go out and we would do street ministry and we would talk to people and we would find most of these young men who are hanging on the corner looking for somebody to hurt. They don't have a father in the house. Their mother is on welfare. And even when their mother's on welfare at home, they don't spend time with their kid. They don't have they're not going to PTA meetings with all that free time they get from them government checks. No, they're at home with their boyfriend. So these young men have idle time. And we know when you have idle hands, you get into things you're not supposed to get into very quickly, right? So it was like, I was looking at Democrat laws and the effect that they took on the Black community. And then I also started to see how they use Black people to push a law to get it in, but then it's a whole nother narrative. And I started to learn about communism. And then I started to read the Bible and learn what the Bible says about communism versus what they want to do with communism. And it all kind of just hit me like a sack of bricks. Like, oh, this is a setup. And then, of course, I watched Mafia 21. And it just was like, okay, we this right here, this is evil. What they're doing on the left, these liberal agendas, and this thing is evil and it's ancient. So it opened up my eyes. And once I know the truth, the thing about me is you don't have to tell me the truth 3 or 4 times. Once it hits here and I receive it, it makes sense and I'm going with it.
I mean, the remarkable thing, Bevelyn, I mean, I just remember again, coming back to the first time I heard you talking, you were talking spontaneously to someone who had confronted you on the street, and you had such a fiery eloquence to you that I was really taken aback. Because it looks like here you are and you're talking about very complex themes that go back in history. You're talking about which side was on which side in the Civil War, which side passed all the segregation statutes, the history of the Ku Klux Klan, the history of the Civil Rights Movement. I mean, there are people who get a PhD in the subject and they don't know what's going on. You know,
Right.
they get suckered into, and yet it looks like you were able to put these pieces in place, grasp the essence of it, not only grasp it, but communicate it. I mean, you have a gift for being able to transmit information in a powerful and interesting way and do it even, not even necessarily, I mean, you do it right spontaneously on the street.
Right.
And so that's what, so you and did Edme then become kind of your partner, not your partner in crime, although I'm chuckling when I say that because later the government would go after you.
Yes.
Now talk a little bit about that. Talk about your activism. Talk about the way in which they framed you in that case, and then also talk a little bit about your pardon from Trump.
Right. So the biggest thing for me, wall builders. My best friend, she kind of ushered me into it, but I like history. I always liked it even in school. I love social studies. So I would definitely dig into wall builders a lot because I loved how they would paint the truth. Like they would break narratives. And it's just common sense. You would hear something and be like, oh, that's what happened. And the Slave Act. Oh, that's why 12 Years a Slave was a movie. So when you look at the left and what they push in the cinema, and even if you watch Roots, Roots kind of tells on itself. They want to be so pro-black, but they even expose when a man went to go and vote and how the white men were gonna hang him for voting. So who are these white men? Were they just some Republicans that didn't want you to vote? No, they were Democrats. They didn't want you to vote. That's why Ku Klux Klan existed. So it helps to build a story together. But now, when it came to the indictment and all of that, I think you understand this more than anybody. When you start opening that mouth and you start exposing things, you don't realize what you're doing in a sense of where it's headed. And it will blow your mind how much these people will watch you because they don't want the truth to get out. They want to control a narrative. And these Democrats, they're different. They're different. They will watch you. I did not realize me being in front of that abortion clinic was causing a ruckus, but everything kind of the spotlight was placed on us with COVID. COVID kind of put us on Front Street because they shut down everything. So all you could do was be home and watch and see, wait a minute, I can't work, but abortion clinics are open, right? And so it was like opening up this Pandora's box. They kind of exposed themselves. They used COVID to take Trump out, but if anything, they kind of opened up Pandora's box to expose the agendas and the things that they were doing, right? And so, long story short, Roe versus Wade is overturned. Okay, they have been watching me. FBI have been watching me. I find this out through the transcripts and the papers that I got once I was indicted. Once Roe versus Wade was overturned, they started in the Biden administration. They started to do a roundup. They were rounding up all these conservatives. They didn't care that they were 75, 80 years old. They was throwing them in jail, and it was left and right. I'm hearing my friends' doors are getting kicked in. Pastor friends I know from Operation Save America, doors getting kicked in, and my husband is just like, babe, I feel it, like for you. By the end of the year, I'm indicted. And the only thing that saved me from my door getting kicked in was because I had grown favor with the FBI agent who would come and visit me based off of January 6th and me being there. So, I mean, from then on, they had the ball rolling. Oh man, the movie exposes how I didn't have a fair jury, how most of the jury people selection were all pro-choice and pro-Planned Parenthood, how people knew Flip Benham, um and how the judge was so cruel, the judge was so ruthless to me. And I'm gonna give you an extra tea. I found out because we're investigating the case, they submitted my sentencing to the judge a year before I even went to trial. It was a lynching.
Wow, that's Bevelyn, I can't wait to watch this movie. And you mentioned at the beginning the short form website for people who want to watch it. Where do they go? Tell us the website, and we'll close out.
WatchPardonMe.com. Go stream it, and also churches are screening it, so you can find a church near you that's screening it or stream it at home.
WatchPardonMe.com. Guys, I've been talking to Bevelyn Beatty Williams. Follow her next, Mrs. Bevelyn W. Bevelyn, it's a great pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm in the section of my book, Ronald Reagan, How an Ordinary Man Became an Extraordinary Leader, where I'm talking about Reagan's personality and the elements of his personality that made him the leader that he was. And some of these elements are surprising or counterintuitive, even paradoxical. It's not clear how someone with this kind of personality would be all that effective. Case in point, I talk about the fact that Reagan was a kind of a doodler. Now, what I mean by that is that when meetings are going on, you'll notice that Reagan is seemingly distracted. He's drawing on a piece of paper. One time, Ed Meese told me Ed Meese was the chief of staff, and then he was made head of the Justice Department. But he goes, I would look at these Reagan doodles, and he'd be drawing like cowboy hats or horses, or he sometimes sketched the people in the room that he was sitting with. And it appeared like Reagan was not paying attention. Another Reagan habit was in the middle of a meeting, he would reach over for the big jar of jelly beans and slide them over to himself and then start like picking out his favorite colors. I noticed him doing this once, and I was really shocked. I was standing in the back of the room. It was one of those meetings in the Roosevelt room or one of those rooms with about 12 people around the desk. And Reagan, again, appeared to subtract himself from what was going on. He, in the case of my observation, he wasn't just picking out his favorite colors. He pulled out a whole handful of jelly beans and was sorting them into piles by color. Now, the appearance here is that Reagan is distracted. He's not part of the meeting. He's not paying attention. But then suddenly he would jump in with a penetrating observation or even a witticism or a comment. And you realize he actually is following what's going on. It's just that this is kind of his way of not getting submerged into the details. Sometimes details that were either didn't matter or were not his province. Someone else's job is to figure it out. It's kind of like if I'm trying to get a house built and I'm the architect, I don't need to choose paint colors. I don't need to figure out whether this kind of beam or that kind of beam, particularly if I've got a guy who works on beams, or I've got a painter right here. I'm like, okay, listen, you figure out the color, and I keep my eye on the larger picture of the structure of the building, other issues that I have to deal with, and so on. Now, Reagan was very punctual, punctilious, which kind of means disciplined. He was a man who was always on time. His chief of staff, Don Reagan, Reagan succeeded Ed Meese as chief of staff, said, I've never known Reagan to be late. I've never known him to change a time or cancel an appointment. Reagan was, he would come in, he would look over his schedule, and he would just carry it out point by point, and in a very disciplined way. Reagan, on the other hand, was not a late night type of guy, which may seem odd for a Hollywood guy, but even though he was a Hollywood guy, precisely because he had had his share of all that, by the time he came to the White House, he liked to quit early. And so he would often skip out on social events in the evening, and he would turn in early. Nancy and Reagan would have an early dinner, and they would sign out. Sometimes Reagan would read a Tom Clancy novel, or he would look through some book about horses, something that was just interesting to him, and he would quit before it got too late. Reagan himself was asked about this, and he kind of joked. He goes, hey, when you're faced with two temptations, always choose the one that will get you home by 9:30. So it's Reagan's way of saying you're actually going to live a healthier life and a longer life if you go to bed early and get going early. And for Reagan, it was not all that early. He thought sleep was actually pretty important. I want to talk now about the assassination attempt on Reagan, so eerily parallel to the later assassination attempt, or maybe attempts is the right word, on Trump. And I think in both cases, it's a window into their character. The assassination attempt is important, I think, in Reagan's case, and also, by the way, in Trump's, because public figures always have some sort of a mask. And by that I mean they project a public image. And we always want to know what's behind the mask. Like, how is that guy really? What is his true personality? How do we get a glimpse into the essence of the man? And assassination attempts, although they would hardly to be recommended for this purpose, they do show you the essence of a man. And they do that, of course, especially when they don't succeed, because you're able to see how the person reacted under those conditions. In Hinckley's case, he took a shot at Reagan, and unlike with Trump, where the shot grazed his ear and missed, here he got him. He got Reagan, and in fact was very close to killing Reagan. And now we find that Reagan, in dealing with this remarkable episode, very early, by the way, in his presidency. In Trump's case, we're talking about assassination attempts that were between the first term and the second term. So Trump had already been in for 4 years, and then out of office for 4 years, and then before coming back, or right after coming back for the next 4 years. But with Reagan, you have a situation where he's just in. And this was almost an effort to shut him down before he got going. Now, look at his reaction. And not just, a lot of people know that he walked into the hospital room and said something to the effect of, please tell me you are all Republicans. A very Reaganite statement. Combines his geniality with a little bit of, he's being half serious. And it's important to understand both the humorous side of it, but also the serious side of it. The serious side of it is that Reagan knew there were a lot of leftists who wouldn't mind if that assassination attempt succeeded. Now, the venom is even more with Trump, but the sentiment, partly because of Trump, is totally understandable even today. Reagan also famously said to Nancy Reagan when she's like, "How did this happen?" Kind of a strange question. But Reagan goes, "Honey, I forgot to duck." And this was, by the way, this was not something that Reagan came up with. The boxer Jack Dempsey, when he lost the heavyweight title to Gene Tunney in 1926, famously said, "Honey, I forgot to duck," meaning that's how I got punched in the face. That's how I went down. But Reagan continued in this vein for many months later. He told his daughter Reagan, Maureen, that one of the reasons he was really upset at Hinckley is because Hinckley had ruined one of his favorite suits. He's like, "No, that suit's not going to work anymore. It's now like I've got to get a new one." And a little bit later, when Reagan was speaking, months later, he's now recovered at an event, and a reporter asked him, "Hey, are you afraid to be going out in public again?" And he goes, "Oh, no." He goes, but I will tell you, I am wearing my oldest suit." Say, this is a continuation of that same joke, as if to say, hey, if somebody else takes a shot at me, you know what, I'm not going to ruin another nice suit. I'm wearing an old one this time. Reagan responded at a more serious level, very much like Trump. Now, first of all, someone might wonder why someone would make jokes about an assassination attempt. And I will say that I think for Reagan, it was not so much his way of trying to, quote, heal. People say, well, you know, maybe he needed the humor to heal. I think it's probably more accurate to say that Reagan thought that the country needed to heal, which is to say he thought the country needed to ease up. He didn't want to have that kind of febrile or feverish atmosphere that was there in the country, by the way, following the JFK assassination, even the Martin Luther King assassination. Reagan's point is, look, this was a nutcase. Let's get over it. Let's get on with the job of running the country. But he also did have this sense of mortality and mission following the assassination attempt. And this reminds me very much of Trump. Trump began to speak in a more sort of theological note after that God has saved him for a purpose. And Reagan himself said something very similar. I have decided that whatever time I have left is for him. That's Reagan. Mother Teresa came to visit Reagan in June of that year. So I'm assuming we're talking about 1981. And she says this to Reagan, a very remarkable and profound statement, and it left Reagan quite speechless. In fact, very rare that Reagan doesn't know what to say, but this was a case where that happened. Here's Mother Teresa. She says to Reagan, "You have suffered the passion of the cross and have received grace. There is a purpose to this. Because of your suffering and pain, you will now understand the suffering and pain of the world. This has happened to you at this time because your country and the world need you."
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.